Could I ask where you're calling in from?
New York City.
All right. Is that home?
It is. But I'll be in my hometown next week.
Yeah, yeah. You grew up in Tulsa. I'm just curious what your upbringing was like in Oklahoma.
It's so easy for us to idealize how we grew up. I mean, just as human beings. Well, so many of us. I suppose some didn't like their childhoods at all. But for me, growing up in Tulsa, had so much to recommend it. I was able to wander around the neighborhood safely by myself. It was one of those I'll see you when you get home at night kind of childhoods. I could go fishing in ponds to which I could walk, bike to a tennis club where we were members, go to the sundry shop and buy sunflower seeds. I had some really good friends. I was on lots of different soccer teams. And at the same time, I always was knew that I was probably going to leave the state for college. And that, I guess, knowing that, understanding that, made me appreciate being in Oklahoma all the more because I really clung to it for all that it was worth and all that it had to offer. As soon as I could drive, I was out to small towns and would talk to people and record people. And a friend of mine and I would do overnight trips and sleep in the car and drive out to the Panhandle and stop at towns along the way. I really am grateful to have grown up in Tulsa and in the state of Oklahoma.
You were just in the Lowdown, and before that, you were also in Watchmen, which was set in Tulsa. Have you kind of actively sought projects that were set in your hometown?
I wish I could say I have, but they've largely both of those just came to me. As a writer, however, I've just made my third film set in Oklahoma. So the first being Eye of God, the second being Leaves of Grass, and the third one, which I'm finishing right now, is called The Life and Deaths of Wilson Shedd. And so I've really cherished being able to come back to the state in terms of my storytelling as a filmmaker.
Yeah, have you found your relationship with Oklahoma and and Tulsa changing over the years?
I guess most of all, I feel appreciated by the city of Tulsa, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I I love coming home, and I don't think you need to have any sort of notoriety um, or as my wife likes to say, minor fame to be welcomed back to Tulsa. I think even when I was in graduate school and in college, when I came home, I was just always reminded what a friendly and welcoming city Tulsa is. Um, and my wife, who's from Texas, avers that she would rather live in Tulsa than any town in the state of Texas. And that right there is a major victory.
Yeah, yeah. Put that in the win column for Oklahoma. um, yeah. Is there anything that keeps you coming back to Oklahoma?
Well, my uncle still lives in Tulsa, and um, some cousins, two of my cousins still live in Tulsa. I love the Sooners and the Cowboys and the Golden Hurricane. And I love the Oklahoma City Thunder. Uh, and my stepfather lives there. My mother died several years ago, but my stepfather remains in Oklahoma. And so I do love coming back. And Tulsa is an extraordinary place. And it only gets better with everything from the gathering place to the Dylan Archives and the Woody Guthrie Center and um, the reconciliation after the race massacre, Magic City Books, Circle Cinema. I've never seen Tulsa better, and so I love coming back.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the joy, whenever you watch a movie that's set in like your hometown or your home state, is trying to recognize like places or landscapes and just seeing like, oh, I think I know where that is shot. I'm curious what your perspective is, making movies that are set or TV shows that are set in Tulsa or Oklahoma.
Well, Sterling Harjo is the foremost expert right now on shooting in Tulsa, not only because he's done it so much and he's built a crew base there, but it's he films the city that he knows. I actually have never set any of my Oklahoma stories in Tulsa. Uh, the first one was set in Kingfisher, and the second one was set around Broken Bow, although there were a couple of scenes set in Tulsa, but mostly it took place in southern Oklahoma. And then the new one also takes place in southern Oklahoma. So I haven't gotten around to shooting in Tulsa yet. And the Tulsa that I experienced, I suppose, still has similarities to Tulsa as it currently is. Maybe the inchoation of so much that happened eventually in Tulsa was occurring already in 1982 when I left to go to college. Uh, I think that's probably true. So, yeah, the transformation was beginning back then, but what it's become is something that in certain respects is unrecognizable. But then again, so many of the areas that uh, just remain indelible to when I was growing up, like Brookside and the Rose Garden and Woodward Park and Zink Park and the pedestrian bridge, river parks. All of that is still very much what Tulsa was, and of course, um, Oral Roberts is all still there, and you can't do better than that architecture.
I guess for those films that you shot in more sort of rural Oklahoma, what was it that you visually wanted to capture for people who may have never been to the state?
So that concept of the flyover states, even while I'm now living in New York City and return to Oklahoma as one visiting where he grew up, um, still offends me. Uh, my and so I like to explore the nuances of the state that might escape people who make certain assumptions about people in the South and the Southwest. Even if, like in a movie, in the movie Eye of God, which deals with, among other things, it deals with an abusive relationship and women's reproductive rights somewhat in a critical way. Uh, it still strives to depict Oklahoma accurately and with sensitivity and humanity rather than in any sort of a supercilious or derogatory way where the storytellers think they're better than the characters or somehow above the tragedies being depicted in the story. I like to use these films to connect people rather than to allow folks to look down on who and what we are in the middle of America.
Yeah, you've you've really run the gambit of working in every level of film. It seems like from big blockbusters to directing your own sort of smaller film projects. So reading your latest book, Superhero, um, I'm curious why you wanted to focus in on the fictional superhero genre.
Because the phenomenon of the superhero movie and what it has become, which is this global hegemon, um, I think speaks to the very soul of America right now. And much of it, what's extraordinary and wonderful about America, because superhero movies, the best of them, are extraordinary achievements that involve a lot of people working at the top of their crafts to put out extraordinary entertainment that can galvanize an audience of 500 people around a big movie screen with great sound. And if you further examine what the superhero movie has become writ large with a company like Marvel, where they've created dozens of movies that are all interconnected, it's a really titanic enterprise. And I think it's uh, wildly impressive. But it's also important to ask, why did that happen and how did that happen, as a way of examining the American culture at large. And so you use the very specific, that microcosm of making a superhero movie, and you really have everything that's going on in the broader culture. You have Me Too, DEI, and Black Lives Matter. Uh, you have um, politics. Often in these movies, it's pitting individual rights against the state. The heroes are usually American because the source material was American comic books. And so you get to see through these movies the culture writ large refracted. And it's a great opportunity for a writer to tell a story inside of that.
I know you have a background in classics. I'm curious if you consider superheroes to be our modern mythology. Is if that's an apt analogy in your eyes?
I think they are the closest iteration of that. You could argue, I guess, if you're not a religious person, that it's the Bible. Uh, um, so, or the Quran, if one is a Muslim. But if you're not a religious person and you consider those stories therefore mythological or allegorical, you could argue that modern mythology really resides there. But I think equally an argument can be made that the whole MCU is its own sort of teaching mythology, and that a lot of people, young people, who then become mature people, discover their morality and a way of organizing the world culture around that. I mean, and around the Marvel stories, just in the what's going on with the Avengers and collateral damage as a way of looking at when that really happens is, of course, the most obvious example.
Did you start writing this novel before you were asked to be included in Captain America?
I did, yeah. I was already writing the novel when they called and asked me to come back and be a part of Captain America 4 as the leader. And it only made the novel better, of course, because there I was in the crucible of making one of these movies when that was the very topic of the novel.
Yeah, I'm curious how things had changed between you making that first Incredible Hulk movie to um, the machine that it became.
Well, of course, first and foremost, what what became possible in terms of digital effects in the interim between, I think it was 2002 when I made 2000. When did I make 2002, 3, 4, somewhere around there when I made when I was in Hulk. Uh, and when in the 2020s when we were making Captain America, what was possible suddenly digitally just it was uh, it continues to revolutionize the the image that we experience when we go into a movie theater. And I think that's often for the better. But when those movies that were made back then are really good, the digital effects, even though they're more rudimentary, actually feel more dimensional. I'm amazed when I go and look at a movie like Pirates of the Caribbean, how the how those movies hold up. The first one in particular. And then also the second one with Davy Jones. Um, and I feel the same way about some of the Hulk sequences in the first Hulk. So, but that all said, what's possible because of digital effects has transformed what's therefore possible in terms of where the camera can take you in a superhero movie. And that's been extraordinary to experience over 3 movies because I also did uh, a Fantastic Four movie in the middle of it all while I was when it seemed like I was not going to come back as the leader. I was in Fantastic Four and I was then gonna be Mole Man if they'd made a second version with that team, which they didn't end up doing. So um, that's different. You know, that the way that digital effects have evolved, which causes less to have to be done on set and in camera, and has meant more acting in front of green screens. Um, but then the resources poured into these movies obviously increased. Uh, from I was in the second one, so Iron Man was first, and then Hulk. Uh, and the difference between our footprint on Hulk and the one in Captain America 4 was pretty considerable.
So rarely do you get a book about making movies from someone who has made as many movies as you. I'm curious what aspect of making like a superhero movie you really wanted to include in this book.
Well, so first and foremost, any movie set is its own little society. And so if you metaphorize that into a narrative, then hopefully pretty quickly you're just talking about bigger stuff than just the characters in your book. So that mini society is really meant as a way of exploring society at large. You add into that all the stuff that pings around inside of making a superhero movie, in particular the politics of believing that there's right and wrong, that good is fighting evil, that there are revenge plots that need to be quelled, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes a metaphor for geopolitics or even for national politics. And So I just kind of couldn't resist it because it's a world I know so well.
I'm curious then, just like the difference in those sort of societies that are built at budgets of that scale versus maybe smaller movies like you've shot here in Oklahoma. If there is much of a difference in between those.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just for lack of a less, I don't know, I hope this isn't an offensive way of putting it, but when you're doing an indie movie, you're kind of exploring a society in a third world country. Because the your resources are straitened. Uh, often the financier can be like a potentate, who's can try to be dictatorial. As a director, you have to be more dictatorial because the your time is limited. Uh, Tempers are shorter. Um, the food is not so great. But you want to put a lot of hot sauce on it. So um, it really is. That's the sort of society you're working in, and it's not a very populated society, and so it can be tough. And then a big budget tentpole movie really is like America. Um, it's a big hegemon of a country. It has a lot of power, a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of fat, a lot of waste. And so it's just more reflective of a lot of the stuff um, that's beautiful and extraordinary and optimistic and excessive about America and also all the stuff that's corrupted by the amount of money and waste. So I guess that would be the difference.
uh, this might be just a very broad question, but I'm curious how you view like commercialism and art. If those are things that you find are in competition with each other, or have you found that like, oh, there are ways for both of these things to work in conjunction well?
I have never made one of my little indie movies um, absent of the hope that it'll break through and play for 10 months to full movie houses. So I have no issue with commerciality. Now, I do have issues often with what ends up working commercially and what doesn't. Uh, but that's more about the people who determine commerciality, which is the consumer, but also the way that the bigger companies are able to reach the consumer because they have more money to advertise. But I have nothing against commercial success. I crave it. It has been I've been really lucky to be in big commercial movies, not only mainly because I'm well compensated and therefore can go and do the smaller movies that are just more interesting to me as an actor and as a writer director. Um, and so in my perfect world, the artistic movies can be commercial. And some of the stuff that works commercially that I find bankrupt of quality, not because of their commercial success, but just because I find them bankrupt of quality. It's not, it, it, and they happen, and for some reason they become commercially successful. Um, but that's again not about commerciality. I love commerciality.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing like a popcorn movie like in the summer.
Yeah, but I also would love for this movie I made this year, that'll come out next year. I don't think it's a popcorn movie. It's just you'd never describe it as that. But I would love for it to have the reach of a popcorn movie because I didn't make the movie so that just a few people who go to art houses to see their cinema are going to have the chance to see it. I wanted to play everywhere and for people to line up to see it because again, I didn't make it for some sort of elitist select few. I made it hoping everyone will see it.
I'm assuming this is how you feel about this book as well.
Yes, and I really hope people will get it and read it. And I'm doing an event in Tulsa this coming Thursday night, and people should come. It's through Magic City Books, and uh, if I haven't sufficiently annoyed you on this in this interview, please come and I'll sign your book and we can meet in person. But we have an event on Thursday night in Tulsa.
I'm just kind of curious, what are your favorite novels?
Oh boy. I guess my favorite, I think the greatest achievement in literature that I have read is War and Peace by Tolstoy. It's not my favorite novel, but I think it's the greatest achievement in literature that I've ever read. And I say that because having written my mere two novels uh, that are very localized in they're both set inside the film industry. I know how difficult it is to to write any novel at all. Because I set these two novels in the film industry, I had a level of expertise, having spent decades making movies. Tolstoy in War and Peace gives you Moscow high society, Moscow middle class society, uh, Moscow lower class society, the opera, balls, drinking bouts, card games, wealth, bankruptcy through debt, every form of interpersonal relationship you could construe. And he gives you history, he gives you war, he gives you, you even meet Napoleon, he gives you the details of the battlefield. It's the bandwidth of this book. He gives you a country Russian estate, just the bandwidth is breathtaking over nearly 1,000 pages. It's just a monumental achievement. Other novels I love Dostoevsky. Um, I love David Foster Wallace, Flannery O'Connor, Faulkner. It's pretty endless. I'm constantly reading, so for me to single out a few favorite authors is almost unfair because I delight so much in literature that often the last book I read feels as extraordinary as anything I've read because I'm pretty careful about what I do read.
Yeah, what was the last book you read?
I'm just trying to think which one I finished last. Um, oh, The Human Scale by Lawrence Wright, uh, which is a novel that just came out and it takes place in the Middle East. And it's a very even-handed look at the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Mm.
A really, really compelling book. Not great literature, but a compelling book. And before that, I read The Oppermans, which is extraordinary, and that is great literature and really wonderful to read right now by Leon Feuchtwanger. It was written, published in 1934, written in 33 and 34 about the rise of National Socialism in Germany, and in particularly in Berlin. And it centers around this Jewish family that's complacent to what's going on. And because of their success and their wealth and their inability or refusal to recognize the danger, uh, the coming danger. And it's really, really compelling book that has a lot of resonance right now.
Yeah. Um, for your next novel, do you think you'll continue working in this sort of world of filmmaking, or are you tired of having to think about film like all the time?
I would love to write another novel that takes place inside the film industry, but I'm not going to do that next. And it's because I want to just keep challenging myself. And so I'm going to get out of the film industry. I'm not going to have anything about the film industry in my next novel, which I've already started writing. Um, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I just want to challenge myself to get outside of that. Um, because it's a safe area for me. I can just write and write and write and write about movies and movie making.
So, you of course mentioned Magic City Books. You're doing a signing this Thursday. Um, am I correct in seeing that you had also you have a screening of a movie?
Yeah, I have a sneak screening of a film called On the End at Circle Cinema on Friday night. Uh, and these places, Magic City Books and Circle Cinema, they're real jewels for the city of Tulsa. And I just like supporting them in any way I can.
I'm curious if there are any other regular places that you try and stop by while you're in town.
Well, I love Burnco. Excellent barbecue. I like Mondo's on Brookside and Keo on Brookside. Um, I guess those are the main places these days. The Chalkboard restaurant is pretty great.
Mm. Well, now people know where to kind of keep an eye out for you, I guess. Well, Tim, this has been great. I really appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for your interest in the book and in speaking to me. And um, thank you very much.